Hey everyone, so I'm actually having to redo this review because I had completely looked at the game wrong during my entire playthrough. Can you believe that? Although I do think that's a fault on the writers for not making it explicitly clear. But regardless, so I'm going to start off with 4 categories. Let's start with the gameplay. So as far as the gameplay, the levels were just so much better. I mean, yes, we know, Idea Factory, they reuse assets all the time, but the way they did the levels in this area where you had like parkour, where you could climb up walls and find treasures in secret places, or even the climbing in the holes thing. I mean, I know, don't act like some of you guys. Anyways, that was all a nice addition to the levels, and even though they were the same design, that made them much more interactive and more fun to go through. So, and it was, a nice reward when you collected all the medals, because that was money that you were getting, and, I guess achievement-wise, and to find the baseball. So, I like that. As far as the combat mechanics go, I think Metallic Death, one of my subscribers here on YouTube, he mentioned that it's kind of like you need to hurry up and beat the enemies before the enemies do a lot of damage to you. Like, it wasn't scaled, like your attack and defense was not scaled to your defense, if that makes sense. Because your enemies could deal out a lot more damage, but yet they would have such little health. So, I mean, that was okay. Like, I didn't really have too much of a problem with it. I also heard that the game was grindy. Maybe it was, but I spent a lot of time, between episodes doing other things, so I didn't really notice that. And plus, I kind of like to grind in the first place. The only thing I find was really grindy is the optional last boss, Delphinus, which had really cool enemy designs. The ultimate weapon bosses had really cool designs, and it's a shame they didn't use those in the game more. But they didn't have any cool, skills or anything. That is one thing that, it's a problem with many Neptunia games. You didn't really need much strategy to beat the bosses until the final boss. The final boss is fantastic. I wish they had done more like those, because there was only a few ways that you could beat it, and you really had to know your characters and strategize in order to beat it. So that was cool. If you're in for a nice challenge, try to fight Delphinus. If not, then it's fine. Also, the time mechanics with the missions, I'll classify that under gameplay. That was an interesting mechanic. I'm not sure how I feel about having to fight the Time Eater over and over again, since it was the final boss. So I would definitely not recommend that again. But it was an interesting concept. Now, also I'll mention, let's go on to, scratch that. I'll actually say 3 categories. I'll include the music and the gameplay. It wasn't anything too spectacular either. It had some new interesting tracks, like when you were in the library, and whenever you're fighting the SEGA Heart Girls, or the CPUs actually. But it's nothing to write home on, honestly. But let's move into the part that you normally look at a Neptunia game for, at least one of the 2 reasons, I think. Is either the story or the characters. So I'm first going to talk about the story. Alright? Now, like I said, I originally had looked at this completely wrong. Nevertheless, I still had some problems with the story. So what the story is basically the Time Eater creates this terrible history for IF while Segami is away, and Segami is the deity of the SEGA Heart Girls. And Segami and IF go back in time and try to fix it. Meanwhile, the CPUs and SEGA Heart Girls are battling with each other. Now, as far as what I misinterpreted, I'll leave the video down below as far as by discussion, because I felt it was quite interesting, because you may not have looked at what the Time Eater did exactly like that. But here are a couple of problems I had with the story. Well, one, I liked the initial confrontations between each CPU and SEGA Heart Girl. That was cool. It really felt, even though Mega Drive and Saturn seemed a little bit different, it still felt within their character if they were in that position to do what they did, I feel. However, I feel like it was a mistake to have most of the game of the CPUs and Sega Heart Girls fighting with each other. When you do a crossover series, I feel like it should be to make both of, you should make all the characters, give them equal time, and make them equally loved. Because, that's why when you had like that crossover, for example, with Luffy, Goku, and Toriko, if you guys know about that, nobody won that battle. It was a draw, even though we all know how powerful Goku is. Though Toriko actually got there, but that's a different story, alright? The point is that you're supposed to spend a lot of time, I think, on, once they meet each other, going through different things with each other. Most of this game was like, for example, if we go to Uzume and Dreamcast, alright, talk to Uzume, okay, and talk to Dreamcast. Talk to Uzume again, talk to Dreamcast again, and then they fight. You didn't really get to see them interact with each other too much in their own arcs, and when they did, they were just fighting with each other until they got back in time. And then when they got back in time, it's like all of a sudden, hey, we're friends now. All of the stuff that we did before, it didn't even matter. We're friends. That doesn't seem right. One of the things I loved about Rebirth 1 is how Neptune got to meet and befriend Noir, Blonde, and Vert. That was so great, especially Neptune and Noir. It really sold their friendship and set it up for the future games. Even though it's not canon to the future games, you could still kind of see, the similarities. But you didn't get any of that. I feel like that was a huge missed opportunity. Especially when I see, I said so many times, Saturn is like Noir, and you could have easily went in that direction. And the most important thing is that Dreamcast never told Uzume, why don't you come have a bowl of ramen with some Naruto in it?
好きな食べ物はナルトです。でも知ってました？最近ナルト入りのラーメンって激減しているらしいんです。ラーメンの細分化が進んでナルトの居場所がどんどん失われてしまう。一緒に追いかけてくれるのか？ありがとうございます。無事戻れたらぜひナルト入りラーメンごちそうさせてください。ソニックがそんな見返り求めてるはずないでしょ？
I was waiting for that, and she never said it. Like, that would have been, as much as Uzume likes to eat and things like that, and that should have been, like, there would have been a nice CG with them at just the shop, just, hanging out and eating, and, I'm getting sad just thinking about it. Instead, I think the whole verses in the title of the game was an issue, because, ironically, I think whenever I used, verses in my titles, those were the least liked episodes, or at least viewed episode. Anywho, but the story was actually nothing to write home about. The Time Eater was an interesting concept, but a few flaws. One, you didn't really get a chance to know what he did. It was hard to exactly pin down what he did because they were being so vague about what he did. And, his reasoning, I was at least hoping that he brought the CPUs to this world and that caused things to spin out in the chaos, or not that he, possessed them at one point in time, which was, it was okay. But what was his motivation for doing that? He wanted to erase the CPUs in Sega Heart Girls. Okay, why? I was also thinking maybe, they have put up natural resistance to him, so he can't eat time, so he needed a time where they wouldn't exist, and then he can do his thing. But they never said that. So, yeah, he just wanted to do it because he's the Time Eater. He's the bad guy. So, yeah, the story was nothing too spectacular. You probably wouldn't get this for the story. Oh, and for this being an IF type of game, it also didn't seem... IF didn't do much as far as the story goes. She didn't do much. He actually hampered the story because she prevented Segami from doing what she needed to do to make those changes. But, anywho. So yeah, the story wasn't that great. You were mainly here for the characters because this is CPUs, meaning the Sega Heart Girls. So if I'm saying what I think about the characters themselves, first let's start off with Neptune. Neptune, the normal Neptune, was fantastic. I laughed. I think the hardest I did ever than having Neptune. It felt Neptune was very bubbly. She did crazy stuff, random stuff. It was great. And you had it's probably because she wasn't, in your face all the time. But whenever she was there, she was, she was perfect Neptune. Net Bike, originally I liked the idea of having Neptune along, but then after a while it was like, okay, Net Bike is, we can move on from Net Bike. Net Bike was not necessarily one of my favorite characters. Now moving on to the others. Plutia, one of my favorite scenes in the game was when Plutia had to talk with Segami. Like, hands down, that's what I wanted somebody to do for a long time, and it really upped Plutia in my eyes. Definitely. I think Plutia was definitely better than she was in Victory. I'm not sure if I would say it's the perfect Plutia, but she did have a lot of restraint. So I think that's definitely a good step. Although then the writers didn't went that whole total queen thing and said they were throwing gasoline on a fire. But, I digress. Nepgear was back in her Rebirth 2 form. And, I mean, it was okay. But I would have liked to have seen the Take Charge Nepgear. I mean, I feel like the Mega Dimension Nepgear, after giving it some thought, would have been able to handle that situation a lot better. But I think they needed Nepgear to regress into that form. So that, we could have Game Gear have a part to play. But I still enjoy Nepgear scenes a lot, especially with Netbike. Nepgear experimenting on Netbike, that was funny. Because, Netbike I started to resent a little bit. But anyways, Uzume, look, if you don't know, Uzume is my favorite character. I'm going to be 100% biased. But I loved her. I was glad in every scene that she was in. There was one scene that triggered me with her in Segami, but, that literally, it was all in good fun. I hold no grudge against Segami, who actually I think I will speak about next, because she's the really interesting character. So Segami, I actually ended up liking her character. I actually liked her sass, all right? No matter how it may seem on the recording, I liked it. It also really fit the tone of IF's game, but I also feel like that's kind of a Sega thing. I mean, if you're not familiar, Sega, they're sassy. All right, that's they do that. But I liked her character. I liked what she brought to the table. But I think the memory thing, well, it bothered me initially, but then after a while it didn't. But I feel like Segami suffers from her bias towards Sega Hard Girls, because then she's picking a side. And if you want the fans of the CPUs, who I feel like are the majority of the people who play this game, to like her, I don't think that's a good thing to do, is to make her clearly biased toward the Sega Heart Girls. I think if they wanted to do that, especially since Segami represents Sega as a whole, why not bring a CPU character that represents Sega as a whole? But that's probably because SG or SC, whatever they're going to call her, is mentioned in Mega Dimension, and they're going to bring her in sometime in the future. So they didn't want to do that for this game. I can understand that, but still, just something to think about. But I personally liked Segami. IF was, like I said, IF didn't really do much in the game. I did like how they gave her more characteristics with her bike. If they brought that over to, the Neptunia series, where she was like that about her phones or things like that, that would be kind of cool. But I didn't, as much as IF is a Chuny, I never really saw much of that in this game. I think it only appeared like 1 or 2 times. So it didn't really have, IF didn't really have that tone. But to be fair, in Blonde's game, Blonde was not angry most of the time. So I guess that's just how they do things. But yeah, I mean, IF was IF, but she actually wasn't my favorite, like anywhere near my favorite character in this game, even though this was her game. So I do have to say that. Now moving on to the last part, the Sega Heart Girls. First, I'm going to start with my favorite, Dreamcast. I think her lines were perfect for her, but her voice actor. I gotta mention this because I think, voice actors make a difference in whether you can like or dislike a character. I think they should have cast somebody else. I hate to say this, but I think it's true. Like Ram's voice actor or Kompa's voice actor, they seem like they would be great choices for Dreamcast. But that's just me. But I feel like she should have a different tone. But I am glad of how overpowered Dreamcast was. That was very on point. Anywho, Mega Drive was done perfectly. Honestly, I wouldn't change anything about it. Mega Drive may have risen, like as far as this game goes, may have been my number one because of yeah, big part was Dreamcast voice actor. That was kind of a downer on me, to me. But I loved everything about Mega Drive. I liked her theories. It was like we were kindred spirits. So yeah, Mega Drive was perfect to me. But I feel like the fact that she was hostile to Plutia majority of the time would cause people to. Well, it actually may. I just think that she should have showed her more friendly side, like her book-loving side and things like that. She should have been. If you liked Blonde, you should have liked Mega Drive, and I don't think that was the case. Well, I mean, there are differences between the two, but yeah, let's just move on. Game Gear didn't really have too much time to really show herself. Really, I got the impression that she was smart, and you know, she gets tired easily. But I feel like it wasn't enough time to really connect to Game Gear. Some people may, because I know some people said Game Gear was their favorite. But I did like Game Gear from what we saw. I just wish we had more of her. And then last but not least, Saturn. I feel like Saturn is literally the person what people might all hate. Well, not all hate. Excuse me. I know for a fact there are Saturn fans, and I'm thinking of specific ones right now. Who are in the comment section, but that's not what I'm trying to say. I didn't hate Saturn at all, but I thought she was being stubborn about, you know, beating Neptune's face in, and again, not something you should do for a crossover series. You're literally making, you know, essentially it seems like Saturn to be the bad guy, because out of everybody in the, you know, the 8, I would say Saturn, the most for the conflict happening, the most fault would go to Saturn. At least that's in my opinion. But she was very much like Noir, which I loved. And yeah, I think, and Saturn's voice actor was, again, really great. Actually, all the voice actors were great. It's just, which I guess even further amplifies why Dreamcast. Dreamcast is also my favorite, and it is hard to bring things over from sub to dub. So either way, I thought the characters, if you're going to buy the game for anything, it's definitely the characters. I just wish I had more of the interactions. And another big thing is the Sega hard girls and CPUs didn't interact with the others in the other areas. Like Dreamcast, Mega Drive, and Saturn, I'm used to all three of them hanging out. They barely did that in this game. Except for the very end, where they had like those events. And then even with those events, they literally split the CPUs and Sega hard girls. So, yeah. Overall, I think I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10, because even though I really enjoyed it myself, there were things that easy things that they could have fixed, like more time with the characters spending time with each other, or maybe a more interesting villain. Maybe they were human, and, you know, I don't know, or an actual reason of why they're doing what they're doing, instead of, you know, they just want to destroy the CPU and Sega hard girls. And yeah, a bunch of other things. But and also you can't switch to another leaders besides IF and Segami. I think that was also a missed opportunity. But yeah, a 6 out of 10 is going to be for me, but that's not my enjoyment level. I probably put it at like a 9 out of 10, because I love Sega, right? And that's another thing. There weren't too many Sega references in the game as well. They were very few and in between. But that's just a personal gripe. So yeah, those are my overall thoughts. Please tell me what you all thought down in the comments below. And I will see you all next time.